How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So I apologize for not uploading any videos last week. Me and my brother, we took a vacation to the beach for a few days, and then I had a cousin of mine get married, so we were super busy last week, had no time to film or upload or anything like that. So I do apologize for that, but hopefully we are now back on schedule. And today I wanted to talk about how to do an Eaton swap on a 4.6 4-valve like I have here. This is a 2001 Cobra. Now this also goes for if you have like a Mach 1, or if you have a, I guess the only other 4 valves that are in Mustangs would be the 99 Cobra. So if we pop the hood here, this motor is actually out of a Mach 1, but this car is an 01 Cobra. It's the same platform and all that. The heads are just a little bit different as far as I know. First, what I'm going to do is go over all of the parts that you're going to need to do this. Now, I would recommend finding a forum that lists all the part numbers and all that for every single specific part that you need, because there's a lot of little stuff that I can't remember all that you need. And when I got this car, it actually had everything on the car. The guy that I bought it from had the whole Eaton swap kit for me, but the car just wasn't running. The swap wasn't completed, so I had to do all that myself. So the first thing that you're gonna need is obviously a supercharger. Now, you don't have to get an Eaton to do an Eaton swap. You could do like a TVS or a Whipple, but I would only recommend that if you have forged internals, because you're going to be pushing a lot more power with one of those superchargers versus a Eaton. Now, the next couple things that you're going to need to support the supercharger to the engine is the intake manifold, which sits under the engine right there. And then you're also going to need the intercooler that sits underneath the supercharger itself. Along with that, you're going to need bigger injectors. You can just get some 0304 Cobra style injectors, which work fine if you're going to use the stock size pulley like I have. Other things that you're going to need is a 0304 Cobra timing cover, and then the timing cover bridge. So it's like a second timing cover, because with this now there's two belts. There's a smaller belt inside of here. I think it's called the accessory belt. And then there's the belt that hooks up to the supercharger and the alternator. You're going to need a intercooler reservoir. This is the tank that holds the coolant that is flowing through the supercharger intercooler, as well as the heat exchanger, which that is another thing you're going to need. You can either get a stock 0304 Cobra heat exchanger, which is what I have on the car now, or you can get an aftermarket one, which is like that one, or this one. There's a couple different brands you can go with. You can go with AFCO, or you can go with LFP. I think that's another one. So the dual pass heat exchangers are definitely a good upgrade to keep the car cooler. You're also going to need an 0304 Cobra alternator and alternator brackets. You're also going to need an intercooler pump, which I had an extra one laying around here somewhere. If I could find it, I can show you guys. But it basically sits behind the bumper there, and it pumps the coolant through the supercharger and the reservoir and the heat exchanger. A few other things that you're going to need looking at the engine here is the 0304 Cobra coolant crossover tube, as well as all of the other supporting tubes. And this thing you're also going to need. This is the idle air control. I guess it's called a valve or a module or something. Idle air control for the 0304 Cobra. You also want to make sure you have an 0304 Cobra crank pulley, as well as the, I can't think of the name of the secondary pulley, but you also want that as well. And you want to make sure you have all of the lines for the heat exchanger, the coolant that's flowing through the heat exchanger and the supercharger. These hard lines right here, you need to make sure you have, because it hooks up to that part right there. You also want to make sure you have one of these things. I can't remember what they're called, but normally that'll come with the intake manifold, or maybe even the intercooler. But if not, you need to search around for one of those pieces. I can't remember the name of that piece at the moment, so if anybody remembers what that is, you can leave it down in the comment below. So that's most of the major stuff. There's a lot of other little things that you're gonna need here and there. So like I said before, I would recommend looking at forums, because on the forums, people have the whole list of every single thing that you're gonna need. Now, another way that I would recommend doing it is just going on eBay and just finding a Eaton swap kit that is complete with everything that you already need. And usually those go for about $2,500 to $3,000, give or take. Sometimes you can piece it together for cheaper, finding local parts. Sometimes that's a little bit harder. So it kind of just depends how much time you have, how much money you have, and what your overall goals are for the car. So moving on to the next thing that I want to talk about. I want to talk about some of the issues that I ran into when completing this Eaton swap. So like I said before, this is a 01 Cobra, but it's a Mach 1 engine, but that doesn't really matter. Some issues that I ran into when doing this swap was, the first thing was the power steering. I was looking at forums like all day, every day, trying to figure out how to do the power steering lines and all this stuff. And at first, what I was gonna do, I was going to buy the 0304 Cobra power steering lines, where I don't remember exactly which one. It might be this one, but it reroutes it to where it goes over right here. And let's see if my brother's car is unlocked. I can show you. And it's locked. Okay, so this right here is my brother's 0304 Cobra swapped Bullet, but all the wiring and everything else is off of a Terminator Cobra. So just for reference, I'm going to show you a few things on his car that's different from mine, and hopefully that'll give you a better visual of what needs to be done. So the power steering line, as you can see right here, there's one that goes over, and it was this one that sits right there. So if you have a little bit more money to spend, I would recommend doing it this way, but if you do it the way that I did it, it operates and functions just like it normally would. The only thing that you have to do is, if you leave this line the same way it is, it's just gonna stretch around just a little bit more. So when I first got the car, the power steering reservoir was sitting like way over here. And he had a line going above the alternator, which was completely wrong. I think it was the factory line from the 01 Cobra. So what you have to do is right here, this line that sits right there, you have to just go to AutoZone or O'Reilly's or something like that. And you have to buy the right size tubing and route it down and under the alternator. And then you want to make sure that you have the proper bracket right here. This one is not a factory one. This one is from, I think the brand was Anchor Room, and I bought it off of Lethal Performance. Usually you can find the stock ones for sale on eBay for like $60 to $100 or something like that. This one I think was about $100 as well, but there just weren't any stock ones for sale on eBay, so this is the one that I had to end up getting. So that's all you have to do for the power steering lines, and whenever you pull it over, this line is going to stretch just a little bit, so you want to make sure that it's still clipped on good right there. And then you also want to make sure that this line right here isn't too close to the belt. Somehow down here I had zip ties on all these lines to keep it away from the belt. So whenever you're doing this whole thing, it'll be a lot easier to see whenever all the tanks are off and stuff like that, and it's a little bit more exposed. But it's pretty simple stuff, but on the forums and stuff like that, it's just hard to know exactly what to do without photos, and you just are trying to read text and whatnot. Another thing that you have to do when you're doing an Eaton swap is you have to modify the engine harness. So looking at this engine harness, I can show you the differences between this one and an 0304 Cobra engine harness. So this one, you notice that there's a break in the wiring harness. So this injector, the wiring harness is actually connected under here, and this engine harness goes underneath the supercharger, where there's wiring for the knock sensors. Now, as far as the knock sensors go, you can just unplug them and just throw the harness back under there. That's what I've done. There's nothing that you really have to change on this side of the car, as far as I remember. I did have to extend this plug, and then the biggest change that you have to do is on this side of the wiring harness. So you have to extend out the alternator wiring. And what I did is I took the harness from about right here and I took all the tape off and I just completely removed the alternator wiring. And now I have it hooked up to where, I don't remember where it hooked up to. I guess it's this harness right there. So now the alternator harness is a completely separate harness from this one. So it's just going straight from the alternator to this right here. And then once you get that harness all, re-taped up or however you want to do it, I would recommend going to AutoZone and buying some of the loom and then putting tape back over it to keep it protected. So that's really simple, and you don't have to do it that way. You can leave it, you can unravel it as far as you want to. If you wanted to leave the alternator wiring kind of connected to this wiring, you could, but I found it easier to just completely take it out, re-loom it, re-tape it, and then just hook it up to the fuse box, hook it up to the alternator, and it worked perfect. Either way you do it, you have to get the 0304 Cobra alternator pigtail connector. So just make sure that that's wired up correctly, plug it right in, and then you'll be good to go there. I think the only other issues that I was having was I got the car running and driving, but I couldn't get the intercooler pump to work properly. I think the intercooler pump itself was on and it was trying to work and it was trying to pump the coolant through, but it just wasn't flowing through. I ended up taking all the lines back out, flushing water through them, make sure that those are working right. And then I ended up having to take the supercharger all the way back off and found that the intercooler underneath the supercharger had a big old dent in it, and I think it was blocking the coolant from flowing through. So I had to buy a new intercooler off of eBay, put it on there, put everything back together, and then it was working fine. You may run into that issue where you find the coolant isn't flowing. I would recommend doing what I did and going through all the first steps before you pull the supercharger back off to check the intercooler. And I would also recommend hooking up some lines to the intercooler while it's already off to make sure that it's flowing. Make sure that that is good to go before you put it in, and then you know it's not the intercooler before you get it all bolted in and stuff like that. If it still isn't flowing after you have everything all put together, it's probably just airlocked. So one thing that people say to do is to force air through the reservoir. So you can take the cap off, and I've seen and heard people do this. They put their mouth to this and blow through it. I wouldn't recommend doing that. You can if you want to, but you have to be careful not to get coolant into your mouth, obviously. What I did, this is pretty interesting. I took a floaty tube that you would have like in a swimming pool, and it fit inside of here. You can squeeze it inside of there, and then you have all this room. You just put your mouth right up to there, blow through it, and then it sucks the coolant down and it starts flowing. So that's the way that I would recommend doing it. It seems a little bit safer to do. And you don't have to use a floaty tube, but that's just what I had lying around and it worked really good. But I would recommend just finding something to stick inside of there and give yourself a little bit of room so you don't get coolant in your mouth. Now, there's probably a few things here and there that I'm missing, but that's the overall gist of how to do an Eaton swap. One thing that I forgot to mention is the throttle cable and the cruise control cable. I don't have a cruise control cable on it at the moment. I just have the throttle cable. So you want to make sure you get a throttle cable for an 0304 Cobra because it's a little bit shorter than the Mach 1s or the 01 Cobras. So that's about everything that I can think of right now if you're trying to do an Eaton swap on your Mach 1 or 99 01 Cobra. And obviously you just want to make sure too that you put fresh oil into the supercharger, you put fresh coolant into everything, stuff like that. As far as the power steering goes, you are going to have to take the fluid out of the reservoir to reroute the lines, so you want to make sure you put fresh fluid back into there. Little things like that. You want to make sure that you have all the right kind of gaskets for the supercharger, you seal it up properly, you torque all the bolts down properly. Those kinds of things are going to definitely matter, so you don't have to pull everything back apart, and you just want to make sure you do all that stuff right the first time so you don't have to go back in there and rip it all back apart because you missed something small like that. If there is anything else that you guys feel like is worthy to put down into the comments that you think I missed, definitely drop a comment down below. Help all the fellow New Edge owners out that are thinking about doing a blower swap on their car. There definitely are some little things that I forgot in this video, so I'm sure that there's gonna be somebody out there commenting something, which is perfectly fine. Help everybody out. So just real quick, that is the basic information on how to do an Eaton swap. Hopefully it helped everybody out. But looking at the car, if anybody's been watching my other videos, you know that I'm kind of getting this car ready to sell. And if you've seen the other videos, you know that I had the 9901 Cobra amber taillights on the car, but now I've taken them off and I've gotten stock GT taillights working properly on an 01 Cobra. All I did was found a normal taillight, normal GT harness. I just tapped into each wire, hooked them up to the right color on the Cobra body harness. And the only thing that I have to do now to get the brake lights working properly, the turn signals work good, but the brake lights don't come on. I have to find the green wire that sits somewhere under there, and I just have to T-tap them together to, I guess, complete a circuit. Probably in the next video that gets posted either Sunday or maybe next week, I'll try and go a little bit more in depth on exactly how I wired that up, because there's like little information out there on the web on how to do that. So I figured that kind of information can definitely help somebody out. I wasn't gonna leave the amber taillights on the car because when I bought this car, it didn't have ambers on it. It just had some tinted Raxium taillights on there. And I had 2 pairs of amber taillights already. I threw them onto the car just for fun because it is an 01 Cobra and that's how it came from the factory, but I don't want to sell the car with one of my pair of amber taillights because I like the ambers and I feel like it'd kind of be a waste of money on my part. So whoever ends up buying this car, yeah, it's an 01 Cobra, but it is just missing the 01 Cobra bumper and the Cobra taillights from the factory. So it is what it is. It's still a really fun car and it still looks good, but those are just the 2 things that didn't come with the car when I bought it. So I'm not going to sell it with those 2 parts on, if that makes sense. There's a couple other things I'm gonna do before I post this thing for sale, which I will show in the next video. I need to clean it up a little bit, and then I'm gonna be switching the catbacks on the car. So it has a Bassani catback on it right now, but I have a Flowmaster catback sitting in the backyard, which I think that exhaust will be a better exhaust to put on the car to sell, just because this catback, I'm still not sure if they make these tips or not, but these are the slash cut tips from Bassani. And I just really like the Bassani catback, so I kind of want to keep this one for myself in case I get another New Edge and want to put an IRS exhaust on it, or maybe I get a Cobra and it has a stock exhaust. I'd rather have the Bassani exhaust myself rather than a Flowmaster. So I think I'm gonna put the Flowmaster one back on it, see what that one sounds like. So definitely watch out for that next video, because I'll probably drive it around without the catback on it and it's gonna be super, super loud. So I think that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Hopefully this helped somebody out that's been struggling with doing this swap and you're tired of reading forums and whatnot. If anybody has any comments that they want to drop in the comment section to help anybody out or to better inform me on something that I missed or got wrong, definitely drop a comment down below. If you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel because we have a lot of cool New Edge content. We're trying to post as much as we can. We were doing twice a week. It might be once a week now. I'm not too sure yet. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like, and I will catch you guys in the next one.